Picture this. It's October, the rain hasn't let up since morning, and the only road back to the highway just swallowed your truck whole. It's dark now, the temperature's dropping towards 0, and you don't have cell signal. What would you do? That's the exact situation Gillian Mercer found herself in on a Tuesday night in the BC backcountry, except getting stuck was only the beginning. What she found bricked inside an old wall would end a 50-year silence and shake one of the most powerful names in British Columbia politics down to its foundation. Gillian Mercer was 42 years old, and she had been quietly drowning for 18 months. Not visibly. She was too proud for that. From the outside, she still looked like the same person who used to get bylines in Canadian Geographic and pitch adventure pieces from a satellite phone somewhere above the tree line. Inside, though, the math never worked anymore. Her husband, Patrick, had been sick for 2 years before he died. The medical bills had eaten through their savings, and the mortgage on their place in Coquitlam had followed. She'd taken every assignment that came her way, regional tourism pieces, corporate sustainability reports, anything, but the numbers kept finding new ways to not quite add up. The assignment that brought her to the backroads above Merritt was small. A lifestyle magazine out of Kelowna wanted 800 words and 4 photographs on abandoned homesteads of the BC interior. The kind of filler piece that paid $400 and kept the lights on for another week. She'd driven up from the coast the day before, spent the morning shooting a derelict orchard near Princeton, and was trying to loop back toward the highway when the logging road stopped being a road. It happened fast. A section of gravel shoulder had undercut in the rain, and her pickup slid sideways, front driver's side wheel dropping into a drainage trench deep enough to swallow the axle. She sat behind the wheel and listened to the rain hammering the cab roof. It was 5:47 p.m. The sky was already the color of a bruise. She had half a tank of gas, a wool blanket, a thermos of cold coffee, and her camera bag. No cell service. She'd checked 3 times. The nearest town was Merritt, and she'd turned off the main road nearly 40 minutes ago. Staying in the truck meant a very cold night. She could run the heat, but at some point the tank would run dry. She pulled on her rain jacket, grabbed her camera bag and the wool blanket, and stepped out into the downpour. The logging road disappeared behind her within minutes. She was walking uphill along the route she'd come from, head down into the wind, when her boot caught a root and she went down hard on one knee in the mud. She knelt there for a moment, cold water soaking through her jeans, and felt a very specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. The kind that comes from carrying too much for too long and never quite finding a place to set it down. She was almost ready to stop moving when she looked up. Through the tree line, 30 meters off the road, she could see a roof line, dark, angular, and completely wrong for the mountain. Buildings don't grow in second-growth spruce. Gillian pushed through the brush. The structure that emerged from the trees was a farmhouse, and it had been empty for a long time. 2 stories, built from rough-hewn timber and river stone, with a veranda that had partially collapsed on one end. The metal roof had held, but moss had colonized it so completely that it looked like a living thing. The windows were intact, dark and cloudy with age, and the front door was padlocked through a hasp that had rusted the color of old blood. She went around to the side, a window with a broken latch. She worked it open with her pocket knife, lifted herself over the sill, and dropped onto a wood plank floor thick with dust. The silence inside was immediate and total. The rain became a murmur. She clicked on her headlamp. The main room came up slowly in the beam. A stone fireplace on the far wall, cold and full of old ash. A wooden table with 2 chairs, one tipped on its side. A cast-iron wood stove in the corner, the kind that takes split wood and holds heat for hours. On a shelf near the door sat a row of Canadian Tire coffee tins and a stack of Reader's Digests, their spines faded to the same pale beige. The dates she noted were from 1973 and 1974. The air smelled of pine resin and something underneath it, a particular stillness that belongs only to rooms no one has entered in decades. Not supernatural exactly, more like accumulated, like the walls had things they never got to say. She found split wood in a covered stack behind the kitchen door, and got the wood stove going with the butane lighter from her camera bag and a torn page from one of the Reader's Digests. The iron box heated slowly, ticking as the metal expanded, and within 20 minutes the room had gone from raw to tolerable. She draped the wool blanket over her shoulders and looked around properly. The kitchen was bare except for the wood stove and a rusted tin basin. The back room held a single iron bed frame with no mattress and a wooden wardrobe with empty hangers. At the top of the stairs, she found a room she didn't go into. There was something about the way the floorboards felt underfoot, a softness that told her the structure up there wasn't reliable. She came back to the main room and settled near the wood stove. That's when she noticed the wall. Between the stone fireplace and the kitchen doorway stood a built-in bookshelf, floor to ceiling, its shelves empty now but still solid. Or it had been. At some point recently, maybe from this week's rain, maybe from the roof finally giving way in one corner, water had run down behind the bookcase. The plaster on the adjoining wall had bubbled and crumbled, dropping in chunks to the floor, exposing the river stone underneath. And in the exposed stonework, fitted flush with the surrounding rock, and sealed with mortar that was a slightly different shade, older or newer, she couldn't tell, was a gap. A deliberate recess about the size of a bread box set at chest height just beside the fireplace structure. Gillian pulled the bookcase away from the wall with both hands, its feet scraping a dark trail through the dust. The mortar around the recess was already cracked from the water damage. She worked at it with her pocket knife until a section came free. Then she reached in. Her fingers closed around something wrapped in oilcloth. She worked it out carefully. It was heavier than she expected. She set it on the kitchen table and unwrapped it. Inside the oilcloth was a metal document box with a latch clasp, no lock. The box had been sealed with electrical tape around the edges. The tape dried out and brittle now. She peeled it away and opened the lid. The smell that rose from it was the same as the room but concentrated, old paper, enclosed time. On top sat a bundle of Canadian paper currency, held with a rubber band that disintegrated the moment she touched it. She picked up one of the bills, a $2 bill, the kind taken out of circulation long before she was born. There were 20s and 50s as well. She counted quickly. Just over $4,000 in bills that in collector value were worth considerably more than their face. She set them aside. Underneath the cash sat a small velvet pouch, tied with a drawstring. She set that aside too and reached for what lay beneath, a cardboard document folder held shut with a piece of kitchen twine. She untied it and opened it. Inside was a collection of handwritten pages, photocopied documents, and a sealed envelope. The envelope was addressed in clean, deliberate cursive, for Adele. Gillian looked at it for a long moment. Then she opened the document folder instead. What she found there took the better part of an hour to read through, cross-referencing the handwritten notes against the photocopied land records and the carbon copy affidavits signed by 3 families she didn't recognize. By the time she reached the last page, her coffee was ice-cold and her hands were not entirely steady. Then she opened the letter. November 18th, 1974. My dear Adele, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time. I want you to know that I tried. Conrad Fitch did not make a clerical error on those land surrender documents. He paid someone in the provincial land registry to produce them. I have the originals, the actual ones, signed by the community under the assumption they were renewals, not surrenders. I have the forgeries as well. I have sworn statements from Harold Matchett, from the Coldwater Creek families, from a woman at the registry named Eileen Voss, who processed both sets and knew something was wrong. Fitch Meridian needed that ground for the Coldwater extension. It would have cost them 3 years and probably an injunction to get it legally, so they bought their way through. 3 families lost land their grandparents were born on. Conrad built his mine. And nobody stopped him because nobody wanted to look. I've been running for 4 days. They ran me off the ditch road on Tuesday. I got the truck back on, but they know what I have. I found this place from a map an old friend gave me years ago. Nobody's been here since the 40s. I'm hiding the box in the wall. If I make it out, I'll come back for it, and we'll take everything straight to the RCMP in Ottawa. Not Merritt, not Kamloops, Ottawa. If I don't make it, Adele, I need you to know that the rhodonite in the pouch was for you. I was going to ask you at Christmas. I'm sorry I'm telling you this way. Don't trust anyone in Nicola Valley with a badge. Take this to the federal office. They can't all be bought. I love you. Stay warm, Roy. Gillian set the letter down slowly. She knew the name Fitch. Anyone who'd followed BC resource politics in the last decade knew it. Conrad Fitch had died in 1991, a wealthy man, a patron of hospitals and university buildings with his name on them. His son had run Fitch Capital Group through the 90s, and Conrad's grandson, Niles Fitch, was currently BC's Minister of Natural Resources, a rising figure being talked about as a future premier. Clean-cut, careful, fluent in the language of reconciliation and environmental stewardship. The kind of man who gives interviews about Indigenous land rights with the ease of someone who has never had to mean any of it. Roy Callahan had never made it out of the Nicola Valley. Gillian understood that now, with the same certainty she'd understood the softness in those upstairs floorboards. Some things you don't need to see to know. She reached for the velvet pouch and pulled open the drawstring. A rough-cut stone tumbled into her palm, deep pink and streaked with black. Rhodonite, BC's own gemstone, found in these mountains, raw and unpolished and unmistakably beautiful. Roy had been going to ask Adele at Christmas. Gillian sat with that for a moment. She won't lie to you. The thought crossed her mind, $4,000 in collectible bills. A gemstone. Documents no one had seen in 50 years. Her mortgage was 4 months behind. Patrick's hospital had sent the 3rd notice in September. No one knew the box was here. No one had found it in half a century. That thought lasted about 12 seconds. Then she looked at the letter again, at the careful handwriting of a man who'd driven into a mountain in the dark rather than put down what was right. She pulled out her camera and started shooting. Every page of every document, the affidavits, the forged land records, the handwritten notes with their dates and names and payment amounts, the letter, the currency bundle, the stone recess in the wall, the oilcloth wrapping, the box itself. She photographed all of it, methodically, the way she'd been trained to document a scene before anything was moved. Then she put everything back. That was when she heard the vehicle. It wasn't the sound of someone lost, the way she'd been lost. It moved too deliberately, up the logging road at a slow engine-braking crawl, like someone who knew exactly where they were going and wasn't in a hurry to announce it. She killed her headlamp and moved to the window. Headlights swept the tree line. A dark pickup stopped 20 meters from the farmhouse. One door opened. Gillian shoved the velvet pouch deep into the inside pocket of her rain jacket, zipped it shut, and stepped back from the window. The front door didn't open. It was padlocked. The side window banged against its frame 30 seconds later. A man climbed through. He was large, close to 2 meters. With the blank professional calm that doesn't belong to farmers or hikers, he carried a flashlight in one hand, a sidearm holstered at his hip. "Hell of a night to be in the backcountry," he said. His voice was level and without curiosity. "Saw your wheel tracks on the logging road. Figured I'd check." "My truck slid off the road," Gillian said. Her own voice surprised her with its steadiness. "I was just trying to get out of the rain." His flashlight moved across the room without his feet moving. He took in the glowing wood stove, the blanket on the chair, the open document box on the kitchen table. The document box she had not managed to close. His eyes stopped. "You found something," he said, same tone, like they were discussing the weather. "Just some old cash," Gillian said. "I wasn't going to take it." He walked to the table and looked down into the box. She watched his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly when he saw the document folder. "My name's Bryce Lund," he said. "I handle security for Fitch Capital Group. This property is part of their holdings portfolio." He looked up at her. "That box belongs to them." "I didn't know it was here," Gillian said. "I broke in because I was wet and cold. I'm a journalist. I was on an assignment." "A journalist." He repeated it like he was filing it somewhere useful. "What did you read?" "I didn't read anything." He studied her. She kept her hands at her sides and her expression as neutral as she could hold it, and tried not to breathe too obviously. "I'm going to take the box," Bryce said finally, "and I'm going to drive you out to the main road. We'll call it a misunderstanding. Nobody needs a trespassing story." He said it like it was a generosity. Gillian nodded slowly. "I'll get my bag." She walked to where her camera bag sat on the floor near the wood stove, crouched down, and felt, rather than heard, him move not toward her, but toward the box. He wanted to confirm what was inside before he moved on anything else. She had 5 seconds, maybe 6. She stood, swung the camera bag over her shoulder, and walked straight toward the back of the house. Not running, walking, the way you walk when you're trying very hard not to walk fast. Through the kitchen, around the tin basin, to the back door. It was warped in its frame from years of damp. She hit it with her shoulder, and it gave with a flat bang that seemed to fill the whole mountain. She ran. The rain hit her full in the face. She turned left into the trees, away from the headlights, angling downhill toward where the logging road had to be. Behind her she heard the back door bang a second time, heard him call something. Her name, she realized, which meant he'd pulled it from somewhere, probably her registration plate on the truck. But the trees swallowed the sound and she kept moving. She ran for 20 minutes through dark forest on nothing but instinct and cold air. When the trees finally parted and her boot hit gravel, she nearly went down. The logging road. She was below where she'd left her truck, further down toward the main junction. She turned downhill and walked. She walked for an hour and 20 minutes before she saw the lights. A BC Hydro maintenance truck, out on a line inspection after the storm. The driver pulled over the moment he saw her. She must have looked exactly like what she was. A woman completely soaked and alone on a back road at 10 o'clock at night. He offered a thermos of tea and his cab heater, and she said yes to both without speaking. He drove her to Merritt. She booked a room at a motel on the highway, stood under a shower until the hot water ran out, and sat cross-legged on the bed with her camera and her laptop. She uploaded everything to 2 separate encrypted drives, then emailed the full image set to her editor, to the investigative desk at CBC News, and to a contact she had at the RCMP Federal Commercial Crime Unit in Ottawa. Someone Roy would have approved of, she thought. Someone who wasn't local. She wrote the cover note herself. Documentary evidence of forged land surrender documents, 1974, authorizing the removal of 3 Nlaka'pamux families from traditional territory to allow expansion of the Fitch Meridian copper mine. Originals hidden at location, photographs attached. Subject connects to current BC Minister of Natural Resources, Niles Fitch. Recommend immediate federal attention. She sent it at 1:47 in the morning. Then she sat in the dark for a while with the velvet pouch in her hand. The story broke on a Thursday, the CBC's first, backed by an RCMP statement confirming an active investigation. By Friday it was national. By Saturday, Niles had been suspended from cabinet pending review, and a Fitch Capital spokesperson was issuing careful, legalistic language about the complexity of mid-century land transactions and historical corporate records. The kind of language that means, "We knew and we hoped you'd forget to look." Gillian's own piece ran the following week, in a publication considerably larger than the one she'd originally been filing for. She'd called the editor from the Merritt Motel and explained, as evenly as she could manage, that the abandoned homestead story had taken a turn. She also spent 3 sessions with an RCMP inspector, one meeting with a lawyer from the Nlakapamux Nation Tribal Council, and one uncomfortable hour with a Crown Prosecutor's Office that wanted to know exactly how she'd come to be inside a private structure on Fitch Capital land in the middle of a rainstorm. She told them the truth. She'd been cold and it was raining. None of that is what she thinks about when she thinks about that night. What she thinks about is the drive to Kamloops 2 weeks after the story broke. She'd done some searching. Not much, just enough. Adele Warmington had been easy to find. 88 years old, a retired schoolteacher, a room in a long-term care facility near the Thompson River, where the windows looked out over a valley she'd lived in her whole life. Gillian had called ahead, said she had something that belonged to her. Adele was small and sharp-eyed, wearing a cardigan the color of November sky. She was sitting in a chair by the window when Gillian came in, and she looked up with the particular wariness of someone who had learned, over the length of a long life, that unexpected visitors usually want something. Gillian sat down across from her and placed the sealed envelope on the table between them. Adele looked at it without touching it. Her breath moved differently, slower. Then her hand crossed the table, and her fingers traced the cursive on the front. Her own name, in handwriting she recognized from 50 years back. "He hid it," Gillian said gently. "He hid everything in a wall in an old farmhouse up in the Nicola Valley backcountry. He was trying to protect it. He was trying to get it to the right people." Adele nodded very slightly, like she was confirming something she had known for 5 decades, but never let herself say out loud. "Did he make it?" she asked. Gillian told her what she knew, and what the RCMP had since confirmed. Roy Callahan's truck had been found in a ditch on a logging road outside Merritt in December 1974. He'd been alone. The report said single-vehicle accident, icy conditions. His body had been recovered. No investigation had been opened. Adele sat with this, her hands folded in her lap, the envelope between her fingers. "I always thought he left," she said finally, "that he'd decided it was too much trouble, that I was." "He didn't leave," Gillian said. She reached into the inner pocket of her rain jacket and set the velvet pouch on the table beside the letter. "He said it was for you," she said, "that he was going to ask you at Christmas." Adele opened the pouch with the careful movements of someone handling something that is both fragile and long past due. The raw rhodonite tumbled into her palm. Deep pink unpolished the weight of a small river stone. She looked at it for a long time. Then she closed her hand around it and held it against her chest, eyes shut, her face carrying the particular stillness of someone who has finally stopped waiting for something they'd given up expecting would ever arrive. Gillian pulled her chair quietly back and let the room breathe. 3 weeks later, Niles was formally charged. The federal Crown proceeded with the historical land fraud case under the modern treaty obligations framework. The Nlakapamux Nation Tribal Council filed a civil claim the same day. Legal proceedings take time. They always do. But the documents Roy had spent his life collecting were now in the hands of people who would use them correctly. He'd known the difference between local badges and the real thing. He'd been right about that too. The magazine piece won a regional journalism award in the spring. Gillian used the prize money, along with the investigation fee, to make 2 mortgage payments and buy herself a proper pair of winter boots. She went back to the Nicola Valley once, in June, when the logging roads had dried out. She walked up to the farmhouse and stood on what remained of the veranda and looked at the old structure for a while. RCMP forensics had been through it. The document box was gone, entered into evidence. The recess in the wall was empty. She thought about Roy driving these roads in the dark, rain coming down, someone behind him, carrying something he refused to put down. She thought about Adele sitting by a window in Kamloops with a rough pink stone and 50 years of answered questions. Some things stay lost for decades not because no one is looking, but because the wrong people are the ones doing the looking. Roy had understood that. He'd built a hiding place designed to wait, for whoever might come along with no reason to keep the secret. As it turned out, all it needed was a washed-out road, a broken latch, and a woman with nowhere else to be. Now I want to ask you something. If you'd been the one to reach into that wall, $4,000 in vintage bills, a gemstone, 50 years of silence, and no one around to see, what would you have done? Would you have walked away with it and told yourself no one would ever know? Or would you have done what Gillian did? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if Roy's story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit the like button. Share this with someone who still believes the truth finds its way out eventually. And subscribe to claim the drama with notifications on. Because every week, we find another story that's been waiting too long to be told.